In the headlines this evening, the ruling Saenuri Party now has a new floor leader. Three-term lawmaker Yoo Seong-min defeats Lee Joo-young, who's widely known as one of President Park Geun-hye's close aides. The nation's current account surplus last year goes over $89 billion. Exports are up compared to a year earlier, while imports drop more than 1%. The Islamic State militant group claims to have murdered more hostages. This after the group beheaded its second Japanese hostage. Those stories and more coming right up. Stay with us. Hello and welcome everyone. This is Early Edition at 6, live from Seoul. I'm Hyundai.
Welcome back. And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us. We begin this evening's newscast at National Assembly, where Korea's ruling Saenuri Party has elected a new floor leader.
That's right. Three-term lawmaker Yoo Seong-min is now in charge of coordinating major policies and reform plans with the presidential office and the government. Park Ji-won has our top story.
Three-term lawmaker Yoo Seong-min has been elected the ruling Saenuri Party's new floor leader with 84 votes. 149 of the party's 158 lawmakers cast their ballots on Monday at the National Assembly. In what had been a tight race, Yoo defeated four-term lawmaker and former Maritime Minister Lee Joo-young. Yoo is more critical of the administration than his opponent Lee, who was considered a pro-Park Geun-hye candidate. Upon winning the election, Yoo emphasized the importance of direct communication with the presidential office and the government.
I vow to have sincere communication with the presidential office and the government. We will closely cooperate while pondering together which policies will truly reflect and serve the will of the people.
Four-time lawmaker Won Yu-cheol will assist Yoo as the party's chief policymaker. The floor leader is in charge of spearheading ruling party legislation and coordinating party policy. But Yoo is known to disagree with major policies that the Park Geun-hye administration has pursued. For example, he has been highly critical of the Park administration's policy of expanding welfare without raising taxes. While he agrees with the idea of expanding social welfare services, he believes corresponding tax increases are necessary. To raise tax revenue, he says, it is necessary to re-examine corporate tax rates, which the administration has kept intact for the past 2 years. Yoo and ruling Saenuri Party leader Kim Moo-sung are both from outside the mainstream of the ruling party, which means the administration could soon lose its grip on its reform drive in the public sector, labor, finance, and education, which it vowed to push through this year. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
The final hearing in the so-called nut rage trial involving Cho Yeon-ah, the former vice president of Korean Air, is still underway. Cho has acknowledged her actions and said she wants a chance to apologize to Park Chang-jin, the crew member she allegedly ordered to get off the plane for serving her nuts in a bag and not on a plate. However, she denied that she violated safety rules. Park was on the witness stand for the first time this Monday. Earlier today, he said unlike Korean Air CEO Cho Yang-ho's claims, he's never had an apology from the senior Cho. Park also said the whole incident made him feel like his dignity has been trampled on. The prosecution is pushing to find the junior Cho guilty of 4 main charges, including a violation of aviation safety rules. The verdict is expected in a couple of weeks' time. North Korea has accused the U.S. of rejecting Pyongyang's latest invitation for talks with top U.S. nuclear envoy Sung Kim. The North also used extreme words like rabid dogs to describe Washington and vowed not to sit down with the U.S. for talks. Hwang Sung-hee reports.
North Korea says the United States is working hard to shift the blame for the current deadlock over dialogue. Pyongyang's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Sunday that Washington refused its invitation to send one of its top diplomats to Pyongyang. This just days after U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Policy Sung Kim said following a meeting in Tokyo that the window to dialogue remains open as long as Pyongyang demonstrates its sincerity.
North Koreans will need to demonstrate its commitment to denuclearization in a concrete manner before we can resume any serious negotiations.
Last month, North Korea said it was willing to suspend nuclear testing if the U.S. halted its annual joint military drills with South Korea, an offer flatly rejected by Washington. Now Pyongyang could be shifting its stance. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was quoted by state media as saying Pyongyang would no longer sit with, quote, rabid dogs openly barking about toppling its socialist system, while he personally oversaw joint naval and air force drills targeting the U.S. Navy. North Korea's blossoming friendship with Russia could be behind Pyongyang's confidence. Russia on Friday revealed plans for a large-scale military exercise with North Korea.
I think North Korea will walk the path of cooperation with Russia in order to end its international isolation. Military cooperation between North Korea and Russia in particular will have a negative effect on the Korean peninsula.
This as Kim has reportedly chosen Moscow as his first overseas destination since taking power 3 years ago. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea has called on North Korea to take concrete measures to improve its human rights situation. Pyongyang has been claiming that a report by the United Nations Commission of Inquiry is invalid following a confession by North Korean defector Shin Dong-hyuk that parts of the story in a prison camp are inaccurate. Seoul's Unification Ministry says Pyongyang's claims are preposterous and the North Korea's human rights violations are evident. The ministry also says the international community will continue to address the regime's human rights violations based on the resolutions adopted by a UN committee against the North.
South Korea's top nuclear envoy will be in China later this week for discussions on North Korea's nuclear program. Seoul's foreign ministry said Monday that Hwang Jung-guk will make a 2-day trip to Beijing on Wednesday for a meeting with his Chinese counterpart Wu Da-wei. This follows a trilateral meeting among nuclear envoys from South Korea, the United States, and Japan in Tokyo last week on bringing North Korea back to the six-party talks. The multilateral dialogue involving the two Koreas, the United States, China, Japan, and Russia has been stalled for more than 6 years. Korea is sending another team of medical workers to Ebola-hit Sierra Leone this weekend, but the team is smaller than planned. Seoul's foreign ministry said the third and final batch of healthcare workers will be reduced to 5 instead of the initial 11. An Italian NGO in charge of the Ebola center on site recommended Seoul dispatch a smaller team as the number of cases appears to be decreasing. In addition to the team of medical workers, Seoul sent tablet PCs and electronic stethoscopes to help them better treat the patients there. The Korean team will begin its 4-week stay on February 23rd after a training session in the UK. Prior to this, Korea had sent 19 healthcare workers to the disease treatment center near Sierra Leone's capital, Freetown. Meanwhile, the Islamic State militant group claims to have beheaded more hostages, this time that of an Iraqi officer and 2 soldiers. The latest online posting comes a matter of days after that terrorist organization killed its second Japanese hostage, Kenji Goto. Our Kim Young-gil has the latest.
In one photo, a blindfolded man, presumed to be a police lieutenant colonel, kneels in the street as a masked militant beheads his victim with a machete. Another photo shows an overweight masked militant struggling to behead a man identified as a captured Iraqi soldier. A second soldier was beheaded at the same location. If the photos are authentic, the killings would come just a day after the extremist group beheaded Japanese journalist Kenji Goto. A Jordanian pilot also being held by IS is facing the same gruesome fate as Mr. Goto. The pilot's father has appealed to the extremist group to spare his son's life.
We appeal to Islamic State in Iraq and Syria and ask them in the name of God and His Prophet, peace be upon him, and with the nationality of religion, the blood, to secure the life of our son, the pilot, Muatal Kasespe, and be gracious to release him.
The pilot was captured after his jet crashed in northeastern Syria in December during a bombing mission against IS. Islamic State has called for the release of Iraqi woman Sajida Rishawi, a would-be suicide bomber, in exchange for the pilot's life. She has been on death row in Jordan for her role in terrorist attacks on 3 hotels that killed nearly 60 people back in 2005. The UN Security Council on Sunday condemned Islamic State's execution of Japanese freelance reporter Kenji Koto. Council members stressed that Koto's execution has once again demonstrated the brutal tactics of IS militants and said those responsible for his murder will be held accountable. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
You know, these days when it comes to cell phones, you're limited to 2 major choices, right? Basically the 2 mega brands. But there was a time when that brand, that back there, LG, used to make so many incredibly interesting phones. Not smartphones, but phones. Some of them failed, but some of them were quite bold and interesting. But not anymore.
Right. I mean, the company was one of the world's 3 largest handset makers, but now it's seen more as a marginal player in the smartphone sector, excuse me, but the company has ambitious plans to regain its reputation now. Our Yoo Seong-min takes a closer look in this week's Industry Insight.
It all started with Apple's rollout of the iPhone. Then the race to be the winning choice seemed to focus on larger displays, higher definition, thinner and lighter, and onto cheaper smartphones. They call it a curved smartphone or bendable, although not exactly bendable like this, but definitely more bouncier and flexible than other smartphones. But with smartphones highly commoditized and cheap Chinese phones with all the so-called cool factors flooding the market, could this shuffle up the smartphone industry? Not immediately. But LG officials believe its new phone has a feature providing new potentials to the saturated smartphone market, a market in which more than 1/3 of the world's entire population is forecast to own a smartphone by the end of the year.
I don't see it being a game changer, but then I still do see as a point of differentiation for the flagship phone. Yes, so they are moving in a direction which I think eventually some of the industry players would also move into.
Experts believe the curved smartphone represents the first step in achieving flexibility and display innovations that are needed to develop wearable gadgets. Curved displays are required as they need to be wrapped around wrists or other body parts. Experts believe the wearables are the next big thing for smartphone makers who will have to overcome technological barriers, particularly in displays.
Probably something that you'd wear on the inside of your wrist with a large display and that's wearable, or something that actually rolled up or folded up that you could put into your pocket and then bring out in its full form. Those are the 2 implementations that seem the most likely.
It may look and sound futuristic, with smart devices rolling and folding in the hands of users. But industry watchers say this technology could be fully commercialized sooner than you imagine.
It will happen soon, in 5 to 7 years' time. Right now, only LG Electronics and Samsung Electronics have the technology to curve the display, and that technology will definitely add value to their smartphone sales in the long run.
Korea's LG Electronics has been steadily increasing its investment in R&D since 2011, with spending reaching some $2.8 billion in 2013. There's no guarantee such investment will lead to a game-changing wearable gizmo, but working in tandem with its affiliate LG Display, the world's largest screen maker, the analyst says LG is giving itself a valuable head start. Yoo Seong-min, Arirang News.
Business partners face a one-day entry ban.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best. With Na Hyung-kyung and Daniel Che.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
Arirang News.
On Early Edition at 6.
Korea's current account surplus hit a record high last year, but tumbling imports continue to raise concerns that the surplus trend is mostly due to sluggish domestic demand. Hwang Ji-hye has the details.
Korea's current account surplus reached a new all-time high in 2014. The Bank of Korea says the amount totaled over $89 billion, making it the third straight year with a record current account surplus. It's not all good news, though, as slowing exports coupled with a drop in imports is pointing to a current account surplus trend that largely stems from sluggish domestic demand. The balance of goods last year rose to $92.8 billion as exports went up only 0.5%, while imports dropped 1.3%.
Korea's sinking imports are partly due to falling oil prices, but it's also due to the country's sluggish consumption and investment.
The pace of export growth in goods was also the slowest since the height of the global financial crisis in 2009. Exports then dropped almost 16%. And a new report by the Korea International Trade Association shows that the country's exports are increasingly losing their status as a dynamic growth engine. The rate of exports contribution to growth stood at 37.7% in 2013, down from 51% a year earlier. The figure is also the lowest since the 2008 global financial crisis. The Bank of Korea expects this year's current account surplus to reach another record high of $94 billion, further raising concerns that the surplus might burden local exporters by adding upward pressure to the Korean won. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
And next up is another all-time high. The size of Korea's merger and acquisition market set a new record last year, a four-fold jump from the year 2011. And with the government easing regulations this year, analysts expect the market to grow even further. For this story, here's Kim Min-ji.
Mergers and acquisitions by Korean companies hit a record high last year. Korean firms carried out M&A deals totaling almost $80 billion in 2014, nearly double from a year earlier, according to data compiled by Bloomberg and the Korea Capital Market Institute. Although the number of deals struck declined, big deals boosted the figures. To name a few, Samsung Group inked a deal to sell its chemical and defensive affiliates to Hyundai Group as part of its restructuring, and there was also the merger of Daum Communications and Kakao Corporation, two of the nation's biggest IT firms. The domestic growth is in line with the global trend. The global M&A market reached $3.8 trillion last year, up 71% from a year earlier, and the largest since 2007. Industry watchers forecast the domestic M&A market to get even bigger this year. This as the government eases regulations regarding M&As and low interest rates have made financing cheaper. The restructuring of conglomerates and brokerage houses are also expected to drive the growth, as well as more big deals expected this year. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The number of high school graduates who found jobs here in Korea surpassed the 10 million mark for the first time last year. According to Statistics Korea, the number was up nearly 270,000 from the previous year and took nearly half of the total jobs added in the year 2014. That also pushed up the percentage of employees with high school diplomas in the nation's entire workforce to 40%. The agency attributes the increase to a government policy that encourages businesses to hire people with high school diplomas and to a drop in college entrance rates in recent years. And Hyundai Motor Group has asked the Seoul city government for permission to build what will become Korea's tallest building on its recently acquired plot of land in Seoul's southern Gangnam district. Our Son Jung-in has more.
In September last year, Hyundai Motor Group purchased an 80,000 square meter plot of land in southern Seoul from Korea Electric Power Corporation for nearly $10 billion. Korea's second largest group planned to establish a global business center on the land, including its headquarters and a car-based theme park. Last month, Chairman Chung Mong-gu laid out the group's vision to construct a 105-story building during his annual New Year's speech to Hyundai employees. On Sunday, the group finally submitted its detailed development scheme to the Seoul city government. The finalized plan is to build a 115-story structure that will house the group's headquarters, offices, and other business facilities. It's 10 floors higher than the previously envisioned building and will stand 571 meters tall. Hyundai Motor Group also aims to build a commercial facility inside a separate 62-story building featuring a convention center, hotel, and shopping mall. If everything goes to plan, the construction will become the tallest building in Korea. The Seoul city government says it will convene a meeting of experts from different fields to review the proposal and examine the impact the building could have on traffic flow and the environment of the local area. Currently, the 305-meter Northeast Asia Trade Tower in the western port city of Incheon is the tallest building in Korea. The Lotte World Tower in southeastern Seoul, which has run into a number of construction and safety controversies, will be 555 meters tall once it is completed next year. 손정인, Arirang News.
Now, there's no doubt that research utilizing genetically modified organisms has helped bring about some valuable scientific discoveries.
But the layman, the everyday man, fear the unknown, and they fear for the worst. For instance, what if these organisms escape the lab and destroy biological ecosystems and even destroy us?
Well, some of those concerns can now be put to rest thanks to a group of scientists in the U.S. Connie Lee has the story.
Remember the movie Jurassic Park? Well, these genetically modified dinosaurs weren't supposed to survive in the natural world on their own, but they did and wreaked havoc. It's a fictional case, but scientists have long been concerned about genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, leaking out of the laboratory and into the natural world. However, those concerns may soon be eased as scientists have developed a new strategy for rendering bacteria incapable of surviving in the natural world. Researchers from Harvard and Yale have developed genetically engineered E. coli bacteria, whose survival depends solely on laboratory-made synthetic amino acids, which act as sort of a genetic firewall. Scientists say that without the compound, if the bacteria escape their controlled environment of the laboratory, they will die quickly.
What the researchers have created are bacteria that depend on artificial nutrients that do not exist in nature.
Genetically modified bacteria are used to make many products, including pharmaceutical proteins like insulin and dairy products like yogurt. So far, researchers have only worked with bacteria and are far from applying the strategy to plants and animals. However, they do believe it's a step forward in making genetically modified organisms more appealing, as this method of biological containment represents a smaller threat to the natural world. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Well, here in Korea, trend spreads like wildfire, and one trend that's not welcome is that people are catching cold these days quite often.
That's right, and on a dry day like this, the biggest problem is, of course, a sore throat. And who am I to say, right? Let's turn to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center to see if she has any good news or good advice for that matter. Michelle.
Good evening, guys. In conditions like this, with large temperature gaps between the day and nighttime, your immune system is bound to weaken, which is why there are lots of people getting sick these days. So try to keep your body temperature consistent by having extra layers of a sweater or a cardigan handy. But if you're already sick, you can try some of these tips to recover quickly and get back on your feet. Now, with that in mind, let's get back to the weather to see how it is. Tomorrow, we can expect similar conditions as today, but with milder temperatures. However, on Wednesday, which is Ipchun, or the beginning of spring, according to the lunisolar calendar, we are expecting rain over on Gangwon province, while the rest of the nation will see a favorable weather. Now, taking a look at the readings for tomorrow, so we'll start off the morning at -3 and gets up high to 6 degrees, while Daegu and Busan will top to 9 and 11 degrees. And to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 9 as well. Dokdo hits 4 degrees, while Bangkok dips low to -4. Well, that's all for now, Michelle Park, and I hope you have a wonderful evening, and back to you guys.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Well, that does it for us. Have a great start to your day or a safe drive home. I'm Daniel Chen.
And I'm Na Hyun-gyeong. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.